Suicide. There are cancer patients who come to realize that there is no remedy for them to regain their health, so they starve themselves to death. That's one way of suiciding, which is really good. I mean, you've come to realize, you become aware of certain things about yourself, about your condition, about life, and you've come to a place of peace, acceptance, where you're no longer fighting for a life that's perhaps not worth living. And then you have someone like Robin Williams, who's been on the stage for most of his life, comes to realize that he has this incurable disease, his brain is going to turn into mush, and perhaps all he'll have for a short while is the memory of him being great. One of the nice things that was said in a TV show, it's called Boston Legal with William Shatner, is that he said this to his best friend, in the show, Alan Shore, that if God is going to force you to lose your abilities, He should be kind enough and just enough to make sure you forget that you were once great. If you're going to be sitting on a wheelchair, God should have the decency of removing that memory from your brain that you could walk. If love is going to fade, God or something out there should have the decency of removing that experience from your memory bank. So there is no comparing and contrasting. Because as long as you were sick, but you can remember how you were when you were healthy, that's like another cross you have to carry. Upon carrying this cross called cancer, it's just too much. So yeah, going back to Robin Williams, coming to realize that eventually he'll just be in a veggie state. He says, you know what, I'm just going to end my life because I know I can't go back to that life anymore. And this other life that's waiting for me, it's not worth it. There is another kind of suicide which is really done or walked to by the giants of human beings. Socrates, he is given an option. Don't do philosophy and you can live for the next 20 years. Do philosophy and we'll kill you tomorrow. And Socrates says, just kill me today. It's okay. And when you say that I want to end my life today and I don't want to just live my life like a beast for the next 20 years, the reason is this, I suppose. He enters the agora, the city life, talking to people with the hope and the dream that if I was to talk to people, they'll understand me. If I was to talk to people, I would be able to express what lives inside me. I would be able to create some intellectual, emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy with people. I would be seen, I would be invisible, I would be relevant, I would be meaningful. I would also be able to transform their life, change their life, make them feel better about themselves, about life, make them understand perhaps what God is. And after 20, 30 years, he comes to realize that no one understands really. Understanding is not possible, teaching is not possible, learning is not possible. And if this is my main goal in life, and I come to realize that they're all failures, it's just a wrong attempt, I can't go back to my wife because I don't really care for her. I don't want to go back to my kids because what are kids really but waiting to be useless adults? And I don't want to pursue money because it doesn't make me happy. And I don't want to do anything. In other words, you kind of look at life, and life is like this huge toy shop. And you say, there is nothing in it that I find pleasurable when you end your life. One of the best stories of suicide is the story that comes to us from the Gospel of Judas. I don't know if you talked about this or not, but one of the nice things about this book is, you have to kind of look at all the Gospels to get to the Gospel of Judas, and what you have is a man who at the age of 12 leaves his parents' house in hopes of finding wisdom. He does so. And then he has this illusion about what he has found and who has become. That if I go back into society, talk to my people, especially Jews, they'll listen to me, they'll understand me, and their life will be transformed. No, in the Gospel of Mark, people stone him. They drive him out. So he comes to realize his own people suck, the Jews. He comes to realize it doesn't really matter if you're a Jew, if you're white, black, blue, yellow, people just suck altogether. So he stops talking, he stops telling them stories. In the Gospel of John, you have a man who just does magic tricks. Tell us that you are the Son of God. He says, okay, well, look at this. And all of a sudden there's a donut. No one can do this. Wow, donut, chocolate, glaze, beautiful. And now you begin to have followers, but you have emotional junkies with zero understanding. People who are inspired to do A, B, C, D, but intellectually they're just novices. So they're kind of useless in the long run. And the Gospel of Judas, he comes to realize, he has some okay disciples, but they don't think well, and they do rituals and ceremonies for all the wrong reasons. They worship the wrong gods, and Jesus comes to realize it doesn't really matter. Life just doesn't matter. And he goes to his most faithful of disciples, Judas, and says, listen, I've talked to Mark, Matthew, Luke, Bob, John, Jack, James. They're all useless. Can you just give me to the Romans? I want to die, because as long as my soul lives in my body, and as long as I live in my body will have desires. My body will be tempted. That's just how it goes. There was a guy, Plotinus. He hated eating food. Because remember, you sit and you think, you're right. You're not a body, you're just a mind. And you're right. Or you sit and you pray. And then at a certain point, your body says you're hungry. And then you eat. Once the food is processed, well, what do you do? Or you have to go to the bathroom. Well, what the hell do you do there? Well, you shit. And what happens if you pay very, very close attention to what's happening to you? You've become a shit-making factory. Just a minute ago, you were writing poetry. You were writing a gospel. Now, you've been reduced to shit. And if you really want to stay at the level of the mind or the spirit, coming down and experiencing this nonsense is really quite disheartening. So what do you do? And this is what Jesus came to realize. As long as I live in my body will ultimately reduce me to just a mere man. And I don't want that. I'd rather find myself always in the presence of God. And because what happens when you talk to people and you're misunderstood? You're irritated, you're agitated. These are human things. What happens when they disappoint you? Well, you feel betrayed. What happens that you realize that you left your parents, you left your culture, you went somewhere for 18 long years, you figured out a few things about life, you're coming back to share those good news, the gospels to your people. Nobody really cares, they're not interested. And all of a sudden your own quest becomes meaningless. And so at a certain point he says, you know what, I'd just rather die. Because if I die, I'll have no human emotions. If I die, I'll just be in the presence of God. And that's enough for me. That's one way of doing suicide. The only reason why many people don't commit suicide, even though life really is not that worthwhile, is we are governed by hopes and dreams. He has a 2-year-old. He may be a hopeless man, but there is this glimmer of hope, which is, well, I'm going to take my kid to high school, and then I'm going to take him to college. I'm going to find him a place. And then hopefully one day he's going to come home with his girlfriend or boyfriend or somewhere in between. When you don't have fantasies or hopes, well, there is no pursuit. And if there are no pursuits, you're no longer an engaged animal. And if you're disengaged from life, it means in some ways you have divorced life completely. That makes you profoundly depressed. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. You know, the only reason someone who has a lot of money, maybe CEO or a white man, as you would say, and has a lot of money and privilege, commits suicide is, for the longest time in our just human cultures, first of all, love was a taboo. You couldn't just go out to Costco, look for someone, fall in love with them in the next 2 weeks. It doesn't work that way. You get married, you go through the hardship of marriage, and 20 years later, you look at your wife and you say, I love you. But this love has 20 years behind it. It has a good amount of fight behind it, a good amount of friction. You've raised kids together, you've done laundry together. And so there's a good amount of history. But it took 20 years. Now, what you do at the age of 17, you fall in love in 2 weeks. 17. Well, there is no higher plateau, there is no zenith that's higher than love. That's the ultimate destination for a human life, love. Once you're up here at the age of 17, there is no higher you can go. So from that point on, your life is going to be quite depressing. You may break, fine, and then you will pursue, hoping to find another mountaintop. And you will get there, but there is no top, no higher than that. So if you're a CEO, what else are you going to do? I mean, look at what happens to the education arena. You're a part-time instructor. Then you become a full-time instructor. Then you become a dean. Then you become a vice president. Then you become a president. Then you become a chancellor of a district. Then you become a chancellor of the entire community colleges in California. Then you say, I want to be a dean at the UC. Then you become a dean at the UC. Then you become a VP at a UC. That's how it is. There's always something more to look for. But when you realize that there is no higher you can go, life can be quite depressing. How many cars can you actually buy? How many houses can you buy? How many places can you travel? I mean, you have to be a complete moron to be dissatisfied all the time. It doesn't work. There comes a point where you just find satisfaction. And then boredom gets in. And then if you happen to have a lot of privilege, you try to distract yourself from boredom. And eventually you get caught. It's something that Jean-Paul Sartre had said so eloquently. You know, boredom is like yama, or death. It just waits for you. Yeah, you know, I told you, you're going to die. You don't believe me. I'm going to come after you soon. You keep running away and running away and running away, and death says, yeah, that's fine. And eventually you realize, well, there is you and there is death right there, and you're gone. So, is it good to be privileged? Yes. Is it good to be privileged and have fantasies? Yes. Is it good to be privileged and have no fantasies? No, because then your privilege is useless. Sometimes, I'm sure many of you in this class have felt this way. Sometimes you have money in your pocket and you're about to buy something. You say, I'm so tired of spending money on myself. I just want to give $10 to someone. I want to feel useful to humanity in some shape or form.